All right, everyone, welcome back. It's time for another deep dive.
Yeah.
And today we're going to be looking at, um, it's a very specific source, but it's an interesting one.
I'm excited.
So we're going to be looking at an issue of the Kennedy Assassination Chronicles news magazine.
Okay.
So this is volume 2, issue 4. And the reason why we're looking at this particular issue is that it's all centered around a conference that took place back in 1996.
Oh, wow.
And it was called November in Dallas.
Mm.
And they had a bunch of researchers come, and
Right.
this issue of the magazine is reporting on a lot of the things that were talked about and some of the research and the evidence that was presented at this conference.
Interesting.
And so, I think it's going to be pretty fascinating to kind of go through this and see what they were talking about back then,
Yeah.
what was new at the time, because there's always new research and new evidence that's coming out on this case.
Absolutely.
And so this should be pretty fun.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
So I guess the first thing to say is that this conference was, it seemed to be pretty successful.
Oh, good.
They said that they had a really good response. A lot of people came,
That's great.
and they were really excited about it. And
A lot of enthusiasm.
yeah, and in particular, they were really happy that they got a lot of young people to attend.
Oh, wow. That's great.
And I guess they kind of felt like this was passing the torch in a way to a new generation of JSK researchers.
Right, right.
So it's always nice to see that
Yeah,
the interest in finding out what really happened is being passed down.
absolutely.
So as far as speakers go, they had a pretty interesting lineup.
Yeah.
So Deborah Conway was there.
Okay.
And she's one of the co-owners of JFK Lancer, which is the group that put this on. And she's also the managing editor of the Chronicles.
Okay.
And so she talked a little bit about what the organization has planned for the future. And then you had George Michael Ivica. He's a professor, author, and a senior editor of the Chronicles.
Okay.
And he gave a talk on the assassination weapon, the Mannlicher Carcano.
Okay.
And then, of course, there's Mary Farrell,
Oh, yeah.
who is just like a legend in JFK research.
Absolutely.
She's got like this massive database of information that she's compiled.
It's incredible.
And, she's really one of the greats.
Yeah,
So that's pretty cool.
definitely.
And they also had this guy, Jerry Patrick Hemming, who was a former Marine.
Interesting.
And he claims to have been directly involved in the assassination,
Wow.
which is obviously a pretty big claim.
That's a big one, yeah.
And they had him on a special panel discussion.
Oh.
So we're going to be looking at that a little bit later. But I kind of want to focus on some of the evidence that was presented first.
Okay, yeah.
One of the things that I thought was really interesting was this presentation by a woman named Sherry Gutierrez.
Okay.
And she's a crime scene bloodstain expert.
Mm-hmm.
And she talked about how, you can tell like the direction that a gunshot came from based on the blood spatter patterns.
Oh, wow.
Like back spatter and forward spatter and all that stuff.
Interesting.
And she did some analysis of the Zapruder film.
Mm.
And she said that based on her analysis, the bloodstain evidence suggests that there was a shot fired from the front,
Oh, wow.
which obviously contradicts the official narrative.
Yeah, yeah.
And she's like a court-certified bloodstain pattern analyst.
Okay.
And, this is something that's used in like law enforcement stuff all the time.
Right, yeah.
So it's not just like some made-up thing.
Yeah.
This is like legit science.
Interesting.
So that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
And then another thing that they talked about was some missing documents and also some inconsistencies in the Secret Service interviews that were conducted by the HSEA.
Oh,
So the House Select Committee on Assassinations. They had a bunch of these interviews with Secret Service agents, and there's all these like weird inconsistencies and stuff.
Oh, really?
And for one thing, there are a bunch of personnel files that are missing from the Assassination Records Review Board.
Oh, wow.
And they should be publicly available, but they're not.
Interesting.
And one of the people that they're looking at is this woman named Ann Goodpasture.
Okay.
And they think that her file might have some important information in it, but it's missing.
Wow.
And then you have these Secret Service interviews. And like I said, there's all these like weird inconsistencies.
Yeah.
So, for example, this one agent, James Jameson,
Okay.
he had these like memory lapses
Oh.
about a trip to Miami.
Oh, wow.
That happened right before the assassination. And then you had another agent, William Greer,
Um,
He got JFK's previous trip cancellations mixed up.
oh, wow.
And then he said that his trip book was up in his attic,
Oh, interesting.
which is like a really important document, you know?
Yeah.
And then there's another agent, Joseph Zaborowski,
Okay.
and he expressed concern that some Cubans
Oh.
who might have posed a threat to the president had ties to the CIA.
Hmm.
And then there's also all these conflicting accounts about the use of the limousine's bubble top
Oh, really?
and like security arrangements in Dallas and stuff.
Hmm.
So there's just a lot of like weirdness going on with the Secret Service.
Wow.
And then another thing that they brought up was these 20 unanswered questions about the assassination
Okay.
that were compiled by this guy, Jerry Rose, who's a JFK researcher.
Right.
Like I said, there's 20 questions.
Hmm.
But we're going to go through a few of them because
All
I
right.
think they're pretty interesting.
All right.
So one of the questions is whether or not Lee Harvey Oswald was impersonated.
Oh, wow.
And there's all these conflicting details
Hmm.
about his arrest and like items that were found in his pockets and stuff like that.
And
And then there's this Dallas policeman, Harry Olson.
okay.
And he initially downplayed his encounter with Jack Ruby.
Hmm.
But then later, he gave this really dramatic account of it.
Oh, wow.
So that's kind of suspicious.
Yeah.
And then there's this thing about Oswald's rapid identification,
Okay.
using information that was seemingly only available to the State Department,
Oh, wow.
which implies that he was already on their radar for some reason.
Interesting.
And then the FBI admitted that they didn't have Oswald's fingerprint card
Oh, wow.
from when he was in the Marines.
Hmm.
And then another one of the questions is, how did Oswald obtain information about these prominent Nazi figures, like Daniel Burroughs and George Lincoln Rockwell, which is pretty interesting.
Yeah, that is interesting.
And then, of course, the big one,
Okay.
the Zapruder film.
Yeah.
So that's what we're going to be talking about next.
All right. I'm ready.
So stay tuned.
I'm looking forward to it.
So, one thing I really appreciated about this issue of the Chronicles was their emphasis on making information accessible.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like they talk about how they want to expand their mail order catalog,
Hmm.
so people can get all these rare books and documents,
Yeah.
research manuscripts and things like that.
Yeah.
Because, a lot of this stuff isn't in circulation anymore.
I bet.
And they're also talking about putting research articles up on their website
Oh, cool.
so people can download them.
Nice.
Like a whole library of JFK research,
That's awesome.
available to anyone with an internet connection.
Yeah, that's great.
And they're even launching a scholarship program for students and teachers
Wow, really?
who are actively researching the assassination.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I thought that was really cool.
Yeah, definitely.
So, it's nice to see that they're really committed to sharing this information and encouraging further research.
For sure.
All right, so remember that guy, Jerry Patrick Hemming?
Oh, yeah, the guy who claimed to be involved.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, what about him?
So, his story is wild.
I bet.
Multiple shooters, Governor Connolly being intentionally targeted,
Hmm.
a French team with a car bomb,
Wow.
Oswald being a CIA asset.
That's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack.
Yeah, for sure.
So, according to the Chronicles, Hemmings, like this ex-Marine,
Okay.
who was at one point a supporter of Fidel Castro, and then he became disillusioned and started organizing mercenary groups against Castro.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so, he definitely has a colorful past.
Yeah, you could say that.
And he claims that the HSCA, the House Select Committee on Assassinations, grilled him for over 7 hours. But he says they never asked the right questions.
What does he mean by that?
Well, he thinks they were too focused on Oswald as like a lone nut,
Okay.
and they didn't really explore his connections or his true role in all of this.
Interesting.
He also said something about Oswald dogging him throughout his career.
Dogging him. What does that even mean?
Yeah, he doesn't really elaborate on that.
It's like he's dropping these little hints.
Right.
But not giving us the full story.
Exactly.
Right.
So there's this guy, Charles Drago,
Okay.
who also attended the conference, and he basically called Hemming's panel a disinformation workshop.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, he thinks Hemming might be mixing truth and lies to create this narrative that's really captivating,
Right.
but ultimately unreliable.
So what's his take on Hemming's motivation?
Well, he speculates that maybe Hemming's trying to get a book deal or a movie deal,
Yeah, that's possible.
or maybe he's working for someone who wants to keep the truth buried.
Oh, like a disinformation agent.
Yeah, something like that.
Wow.
But Drago doesn't completely dismiss Hemming.
Oh.
He says that if there's even a chance he's telling the truth,
Yeah.
then we need to take him seriously.
Hmm.
He even suggested that Hemming should be offered immunity and put into witness protection.
Wow, really?
Yeah, and then at the end of his panel, Hemming says this really chilling line.
Ah, what is it?
He says, "I've got a family. What else can I do?"
Oh, wow.
It's like he's afraid of something.
Yeah, that's definitely ominous.
Makes you wonder what kind of pressure he's under.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so enough about Hemming for now.
Okay.
Let's get back to the Zapruder film.
All right, let's do it.
This issue of the Chronicles really dives into the debate about its authenticity.
Hmm.
And they talk about how the concept of proof
Okay.
is different depending on the context.
Right.
Like in a court of law, proof means you have enough evidence to convict someone.
Yeah.
But in mathematics, proof has to be like a watertight demonstration based on absolute truths.
Right.
And in science, you often prove something by disproving a competing hypothesis.
Okay, I see.
So when it comes to the Zapruder film,
Yeah.
the hypothesis is that it's authentic, meaning it hasn't been altered in any way.
Right.
But if researchers can find evidence that suggests it has been altered,
Yeah.
then that hypothesis falls apart.
Makes sense.
And that's what a lot of these researchers are trying to do. They're
Mhm.
looking for anomalies and inconsistencies in the film
Okay.
that might indicate tampering.
So what kind of anomalies are we talking about?
Well, for example, James Fetzer,
Okay.
he points out these discrepancies in the background magnification
Mm-hmm.
that can't be explained by the camera's movements alone.
Oh, wow.
And he thinks this suggests that frames might have been removed and the background was enlarged to hide the gaps.
Interesting.
And then there's David Mantik.
Okay.
He noticed this weird white spot in the background
Hmm.
near the limousine.
Okay.
And he believes it was artificially inserted,
Oh, wow.
possibly to create the illusion of movement
Hmm.
when the car was actually stopped or slowing down.
Interesting.
And then you have Jack White,
Okay.
who found all these smaller anomalies,
Like what?
like a car that looks like it's floating in midair,
Huh.
spectators that are frozen in time,
Wow.
a little girl taking 2 steps forward with the same leg.
That's weird.
Yeah, it's pretty bizarre.
So are these anomalies enough to prove that the film has been altered?
Well, it's hard to say for sure,
Okay.
but they definitely raise some serious questions.
Yeah, definitely.
And then there's David Lifton.
Okay.
He focuses on the headshot sequence,
Hmm.
and he argues that the way Kennedy's head moves
Yeah.
defies the laws of physics.
Oh, wow.
So he thinks that this part of the film might have been manipulated
Hmm.
to fit a certain narrative.
Interesting.
And he's calling for a really thorough analysis of the original film,
Okay.
using modern forensic techniques
Hmm.
to try and settle this debate once and for all.
Yeah, that would be great.
So, I mean, what do you make of all this?
Well, it's a lot to take in, that's for sure.
Yeah.
But I think the biggest takeaway for me is that there are still a lot of unanswered questions about the Zapruder film
Absolutely.
and its authenticity.
Right.
And I think it's important to keep asking those questions.
Yeah, for sure. You know, it's amazing to me that a whole movie like that can still cause so much debate all these years later.
Right. It really speaks to how much mystery still surrounds this whole thing.
Absolutely. I mean,
Uh,
the Zapruder film, even with all the questions about whether it's been altered or not,
yeah.
it still gives us this visual connection to the assassination.
It's like a window into that day.
Exactly. And even if parts of it have been changed, like you were saying before, those changes themselves might tell us something.
That's right. It's like you're trying to put together a puzzle,
Hmm.
and some of the pieces might be in the wrong place.
Yeah.
But figuring out how they were moved can help you see the bigger picture.
I like that.
Speaking of other pieces of the puzzle,
Okay.
this issue of the Chronicles also talks about the Patsy Paschal film.
Oh, yeah, the one that was shot from the courthouse.
That's the one.
I remember that, yeah.
It shows the motorcade after the assassination,
Right.
and there's some movement behind the picket fence.
The grassy knoll.
Exactly.
And they think that movement happened like 16 seconds after the headshot.
Yeah. Which could mean it was the gunman getting away.
Another point for the multiple shooter theory.
Seems like it, and that fits with what Hemming was saying,
It
too.
really does. So, I mean, where does this all leave us? We've talked about blood spatter. We've looked at the Zapruder film. And we've even heard from someone who claims to have been involved in the assassination.
It's a lot.
It is. And I feel like I have even more questions now than I did when we started.
That's how it goes sometimes, you know? You start digging into something and you realize just how much you don't know.
It's like that Carl Sagan quote, somewhere Something incredible is waiting to be known.
Yeah, that's a good one.
And I think in the case of the JFK assassination, we're still waiting to know that something incredible.
I agree, but I think this deep dive has shown us that people are still searching for those answers.
They are. And thanks to groups like JFK Lancer who are trying to make all this research more accessible, maybe we'll get closer to the truth someday.
I hope so, because this is a part of history that deserves to be understood.
Absolutely.
Right.
So, until next time, keep questioning, keep digging, and keep searching for the truth.
And who knows, maybe we'll uncover that something incredible along the way.